This is Empty Nesters, written by Craig A. Falconer, narrated by Megan Carter. Chapter 1. As their 17-year-old son Stephen boarded the waiting spacecraft, Martin and Claire Holmes felt a mixture of emotions like none they had ever known. They were immensely proud of Stephen, of course, both for earning his spot on the journey and for being brave enough to go through with it. But as proud as they felt, the overwhelming emotion within them was one of trepidation. Space. It was risky enough for experienced astronauts, but for high school students, even as precocious as these carefully selected few, the whole thing was completely unprecedented. Media cameras flanked the couple, as well as the other parents in attendance at the edge of the safety zone. Martin and Claire only knew one other parent, a quiet man from their town whose daughter went to school with Stephen. 6 pairs of students had been selected from schools across the country, with the schools chosen based on their national rankings and a short list of students drawn up from each based on exceptional aptitude in science-related subjects. From there, a full year before this long-awaited launch, the students with the greatest passion for space travel were chosen. The short orbital mission would do wonders for Stephen's chances of landing a career in astronautics, and his life had recently been devoted almost entirely to preparing for it. The physical preparation was thorough without being overly intense, given that modern spacecraft didn't subject their passengers to the same levels of force as earlier rocket-based launch systems. 3 highly experienced astronauts would be in control of the craft, with Stephen and his comrades having no responsibilities beyond the physics and chemistry-related experiments they had been designated to carry out during their time in space. Stephen was the opposite of a publicity seeker and didn't try to take advantage of the moderate fame his selection bestowed. He was, however, in little doubt that participating in the mission would bestow upon him long-lasting benefits in terms of academic and professional opportunities. After all, as far as extracurricular activities or work experience programs went, it didn't get much better than blasting off into space. It was widely understood that the students wouldn't be the only ones benefiting from this remarkable endeavor, though. The mission was a joint venture between public government agencies and AstroTours, a private space tourism company with huge ambitions to make orbital flights commonplace. AstroTours provided the logistics and would benefit from tremendous publicity, while space agency officials were keen to reignite a passion for exploration, and educational leaders saw a huge opportunity to spark interest in the sciences among a largely disinterested youth. With a few minutes remaining on the countdown clock, Darius Spector, the maverick CEO of AstroTours, stepped forward to give a final speech to the parents and the media. He began by promising a wonderful journey for the children, thanking the parents for putting their trust in AstroTours and assuring them that safety was his #1 priority. He also stressed how honored he was to be part of such a wonderful mission, and how humbled he was that the government had reached out to partner with his company rather than any other. "And this is a huge leap forward for space tourism as a whole," the sharply dressed billionaire continued. "Today, of course, we have provided our state-of-the-art spacecraft and our entire infrastructure at cost price. Some things are more important than money, and reigniting the flame of passion for space travel is one of them." A cynic might have suggested that AstroTours would monetarily benefit from rising interest in space travel more than anyone, but no vocal cynics were present. "With the technological prowess of our craft and our team," he went on, "a bright future lies ahead. Be sure to check out our website and follow my social media channels for information on how to join the waiting list for future missions. Our commercial flights begin in just 6 months, and they might be more affordable than you think." Darius, as he was singularly known, continued in this vein for another minute or so. His heavy focus on advertising AstroTours' future offerings somewhat undermined his earlier proclamation that money wasn't the most important thing here. As it went, he had to be interrupted by a government official who wanted to get a quick statement in before the final countdown began. It turned out to be too late for this statement, however, with the loud countdown and roaring engines ensuring that Darius got the last word. While some camera crews focused on the launch site as the craft carried the youngest ever astronauts into space, most focused instead on their parents. One cameraman in particular honed in on Martin and Claire. Relief flooded over them when the craft took off without incident and continued its space-bound path. Smiles filled their faces as cheers and hollers circled. The cameraman's shoulders slumped. He pulled away his focus after a few seconds of jubilation, unable to easily hide his soulless disappointment that he hadn't captured the jackpot of close-up parental reactions to an explosive disaster. No one was looking at him, though. All eyes were pointed upwards, gleefully taking in the wonderful sight of the AstroTour's spacecraft soaring through the sky. The feelings of relief and happiness coursing through Martin and Claire, however, would not last for long. Because unbeknownst to them, hidden forces were at work. Forces that didn't just see their son and his comrades as profitably useful propaganda, but as the means to an extremely nefarious end. Chapter 2. At first, it seemed like a glitch. Around 9 hours after the early morning launch, when homebound communication was finally allowed, Stephen wasted no time in making a video call to his parents. They joked around, asking what he was having for dinner and what the weather was like. He laughed along and told them it was going to be a pretty low-key night, casually taking in the Earth set. For Martin and Claire, the sight of their son in a bona fide spacecraft was quite incredible. Needless to say, though, this was nothing compared to the sight Stephen was taking in. He was all set to show them his view of Earth when, all of a sudden, the video feed cut out. They waited for it to return, first patiently, and then with growing unease. After a few minutes, Claire's phone rang with an incoming call from Wallace Haynes, the couple's government liaison contact for the mission. Her heart raced as she picked up. "Hello?" she choked out. "Good evening, Mrs. Holmes," Haynes began. "We wanted to let you know, before any sensationalist news reports come out, that we have temporarily lost contact with the mission team. There's no reason for concern. We expect contact to be reestablished soon. I won't be able to answer any questions for now, but we'll be in touch as soon as we have an update. As I suggested, don't pay too much attention to any news reports." Just like that, the call was over. Perfunctory didn't even cover it. Martin, who had been listening in, was so incensed that he asked for Claire's phone and immediately called Haynes back. Unfortunately, the man didn't pick up. With nowhere else to turn, the couple sat in front of their TV and tuned in to the evening news. Already, the loss of contact with the mission was the only thing anyone was talking about. The story had leaked out, but the news didn't end there. After only a few seconds of viewing, the headline banner at the bottom of the screen changed to display a message that made the couple positively shiver. Source: Mission lost. Official confirmation to follow. "How can it be lost?" Claire croaked, her voice hollow. "How could they lose a spacecraft? We were talking to him a few minutes ago." When Martin managed to tear his eyes away from the screen, he turned to his wife. He knew what lost meant in this context, even if his wife's mind was closing itself down to protect her from the reality. According to a source the news station saw as strong enough to quote, contact with the spacecraft wasn't all that had been lost. The craft itself had been lost, and not in a misplaced kind of way. Martin tried over and over again to call Haynes for an official update, but there was never any answer. For the next 25 minutes, all the couple could do was watch in helpless pain as news anchors discussed the apparent tragedy with only occasional disclaimers that nothing was yet known for certain. The anchors consistently assured viewers that they were doing all they could to get Darius Spector on the line, as though his presence was what mattered right now. The couple's wait for certainty was agonizing, but when the news came, it brought no relief. When the news came, in fact, it brought a longing for uncertainty. because the news that came in Haynes' second phone call was the kind that words could never do justice to. Certainly, agonizing didn't come close. Paralyzing was perhaps the most apt word, for neither parent could do or say anything from the very moment Wallace Haynes uttered, "I'm sorry," and confirmed that their worst fear had come to pass. Stephen, their affable and wonderful only child, was gone. The next hour passed in a blur that neither Martin nor Claire would ever remember. They slumped and they sobbed, with only each other for support. The fact that each was so totally broken by the news only made it worse for the other, now not only dealing with an unspeakable loss, but also watching their life partner being visibly devastated by the very same thing. Their TV continued to spew out updates and reactions in the background. The news was officially confirmed only a few minutes after Haynes extended them the bare courtesy of a private call, although it seemed fairly obvious now that he had known from the time of the first call and wasn't at liberty to tell them. What began the day as a major piece of positive PR for several government departments was now going to be an unmitigated disaster for all involved. But their professional and political struggles paled in comparison to the aching loss felt by the families of the craft's passengers and crew. Haynes promised the couple that counseling would be available for as long as they needed it. Right now, though, they couldn't even think about that. It didn't feel like they were in a tunnel with even the merest possibility of a small light at the end. Instead, they were in a pit of despair. As the TV news continued to fill the air, which was now punctuated by less outward sobbing and more desolate silence than before, attention turned from the fate of the children to a rapidly accelerating blame game. What seemed like fringe conspiracy theories focusing on everything from espionage to insurance fraud received primetime attention, but one particular target was quickly found and settled upon. In what seemed like no time, the narrative quickly shifted to pin responsibility on Darius Spector and his Astro Tours Corporation. Unnamed government sources, like those who had leaked news of the disaster before the parents were even told, were now suggesting Darius was under investigation for cutting corners in the mission's safety procedures. Naturally, the anchor's performative grief, and with it the mood of the nation, quickly turned to outrage. Calls had been coming in incessantly on both of the couple's phones from the moment news of the disaster first broke. They were rejecting them all, from the unknown numbers to the close friends and family. Quite simply, they were in no state to talk to anyone. Several transcribed voicemail messages revealed the desperate attempts of media outlets to get a comment from the grieving parents, having sourced their personal numbers by hook or by crook. These were easy to dismiss. Shortly before sunset, however, a message arrived on Martin's phone that made him sit up straight for the first time since the crushing news had broken him. "What?" Claire asked, speaking weakly.
"It's Jack Bexby," Martin replied. "Lucy's dad. He was at the launch. He says something doesn't add up with the official story. He doesn't buy the line that they've really lost the craft.
Martin," Claire interrupted, tapping his leg to take his attention from the phone and direct it to the TV. On the screen, an image of none other than Jack Bexby himself now appeared. Martin paid attention. "We're hearing now that one of the grieving parents, a Jack Bexby from Halston Springs, home of the closest participating school to today's launch, has posted a statement," the anchor revealed. "Some may take this as more of a call for help or an attempt to deny reality and bargain with his own grief, but Mr. Bexby is refusing to accept what he calls the government narrative about the mission disaster. Short of any evidence or reason to think this is plausible, my human reaction to this statement is that I hope Mr. Bexby gets the help he needs at what must be a very trying time." Martin shook his head in disbelief at how callous the anchor could be. He looked back at his phone and told Claire the rest.
"He says he's found a factual inconsistency in the story and he wants to tell us in person, without the media seeing any of us driving between each other's houses. They're already in town, he says. And after this hit job on him, I definitely don't think we want to invite him here or drive there.
So what is Jack actually saying? Claire pushed. What does he want? Martin held out the phone so she could read the message too.
A vigil,
he said.
Tonight, 8 p.m. at the softball diamond. He wants a community vigil where we can talk face to face. Look, he says he knows it all sounds crazy, but that we're the only people who might listen to him, and that there are things he can't do by himself. There's a course of action he says he can take, but he needs to know we're on board.
Claire's eyes narrowed. So whatever this is about, he doesn't want to say it in text?
Exactly.
Martin nodded.
And sure, he's grieving, but we're in the same boat and we're not making up crazy theories. He might have actually spotted something. There could be more to this. The government turned on Darius and Astro Tours so fast. It does almost seem like it could be premeditated, don't you think?
I think this all sounds crazy, Claire sighed. But it seems like crazy is all we've got. So if there's any chance Jack can help us get to the bottom of this, and if getting to the bottom of this has any chance of getting Stephen home, we have to go for it. Martin grasped his phone and typed a 3-word reply. See you there. Chapter 3. There was no plan. There was no reason to expect anything good would come of the vigil. In reality, the couple knew there was very likely no hope of ever seeing Stephen again. But for the first time since the news broke, they at least had a next move. Whether Jack Bexby was crazy or not, attending the vigil would at least get them out of their own heads. And like Claire said in reaction to the idea, any chance to expose a hidden truth and perhaps even bring Stephen home, however slight and however crazy it might sound, was a chance they had to take. Preparing to venture into the outside world proved no mean feat. Claire broke down just getting a jacket from the hook next to Stephen's, while Martin struggled while walking past the boy's empty room and catching sight of the wall-mounted photo collage showing his time at space camp. They had always tried to give their son unwavering support and the best chance of living his dreams. But now that his dream had turned into a nightmare, they had natural regrets about everything. As Martin stood shakily by the open bedroom door, Claire placed a hand on his back to lend some strength. Time had passed in a haze, with some glances at the clock revealing it had moved forward in seemingly impossible intervals, and others making it feel like time was standing still. Countless calls flooded in from almost all angles, but no further outreach came from Government Liaison Officer Wallace Haynes. The grief counselor he promised, meanwhile, remained equally distant. Friends and family called often, with some of their transcribed voicemails mentioning news stories that the couple were seeing and hearing on TV. Public opinion was no singular or tangible whole, but patterns had certainly developed. Underlying most of them, as tended to be the case in times of national mourning, was an unhealthy dose of media sensationalism. The crassness of it all was impossible to miss. News commentators, vying for attention in a race to the bottom, pushed narratives and theories that most rational people would see as huge leaps in logic. All the while, Darius Spector was hounded as public enemy number 1. During one segment, the talking heads discussed the incident as another sign that modern teenagers truly were members of a doomed generation with little to look forward to in a challenging world. Meanwhile, on social media, influencers and everyday citizens alike engaged in hashtag campaigns and viral trends that clearly had far more to do with public posturing than actual empathy. Many posted long and supposedly heartfelt messages of distress, seeking tenuous connections to prove they were more affected by the situation than everyone else, and thus more deserving of attention and sympathy. Countless internet memes were already circulating to make light of the situation, with the tragedy quickly becoming just another topic to joke about. Jack Bexby, the grieving father who had publicly questioned the official story, was the chief target, and had been roundly rechristened Crazy Dad. One particularly popular image superimposed Bexby's head onto the body of a man quite literally grasping at straws. Perhaps least tastefully of all, companies were already producing print-on-demand memorial merchandise, such as T-shirts and keychains, to profiteer from the tragedy. An entrepreneur appeared on screen to boast that his company had already created a series of mission-related trading cards, featuring the lost passengers and other mission-related images. While these collectibles would appeal primarily to boys, he said, a memorial, space-themed makeup range was also now available to order as a tribute to the lost students. One disillusioned celebrity commentator, a movie star who tragically lost a child in a bus crash several years earlier, was called upon to give their uniquely positioned take.
"It's a damn shame what's happened to these kids, and it's a damn shame what's happening to their parents,"
the man sighed, talking to an anchor in her mid-30s.
"Legacy media like this station is now made up of desperate outlets spreading misery for profit for an audience older than us. The social media sites you're probably on are full of people around your age pretending to care about things for clout and attention. And the social media sites your kids are on are just 4 layers of irony and everyone making jokes out of everything. They'll make memes and jokes of much broader disasters than this. You see, the world doesn't make sense to them, so the only way to deal with it is to be detached. I had to deal with a lot of those sick jokes, but with time I came to realize those are idiot kids being idiot kids. People like you should know better than to do what you're doing."
After this comment, the interview then came to an abrupt end. When it came time for Martin and Claire to leave, they were relieved to see no media encampment outside their home. Their short drive towards the softball diamond where Bexby's vigil would take place saw them pass several local stores with supportive posters and notices in their windows. None of this seemed crudely calculated to draw in business, and it felt in keeping with the town of Halston Springs and its famed community spirit. There was a large media presence near the site of the publicized vigil, albeit held back by a police perimeter. The sight of the police made the couple think they were probably responsible for ensuring no camera crews had made their way into the purely residential areas, where they could only cause distress. There was no frenzy of commotion as the couple stepped out of their car. They heard the clicking of cameras and a few yelled questions from news reporters, but not the hubbub they had feared. A large number of local residents had turned out, candles in hand, to show support in this time of grief. Although many still saw themselves as supporting the couple in a time of loss, in their own minds there was still a small reason to hold out hope. Jack Bexby had called this vigil to share something he didn't want to say digitally, and their eyes were peeled in search of him. As the minutes passed and various neighbors offered them private comments of consolation, Bexby's absence became increasingly conspicuous.
"Did you hear?"
one man asked them in a low voice, taking his opportunity when the couple's immediate vicinity was briefly free from other prying ears. "Hear what?" Claire replied. The man leaned in even closer.
"About Jack. I live across the street from him. They took him away 2 hours ago. Not police. They looked medical. He kept saying he wasn't crazy. At least these vultures don't know, and if anyone else saw it, they've kept it quiet. I don't know what's going on, but it feels wrong. He must have spoken to you guys, right? He can't have been as vague with you as he was in his statement."
Neither Martin nor Claire knew what to say.
"Oh, so he was? You don't know what he found?"
the neighbor continued.
"Okay, well, you didn't hear this from me, but Jack has always been, I wouldn't say weird, but he keeps to himself. Since he lost his wife a few years ago, and especially since the news last year that his daughter was picked for the mission, it seemed like he spent almost all of his free time in his garage. As soon as he gets home from work, I see the light go on. Early in the morning, I see the light on. He has a retractable section of roof at the back for his telescope. I can't say anything for sure, but if he found something or recorded information on something, he was probably in there when he did it."
Across from the couple, they noticed a sudden movement in the bushes. A previously unseen member of the media, or perhaps more accurately, in his case, the paparazzi, was quickly pulling in what looked like a telescopic-armed microphone.
"Shit,"
Martin cursed under his breath.
I think that guy heard some of that. What's Bexby's address? 4281 Winter Drive, the neighbor replied. You're going to go?
Martin turned to Claire. This revelation changed a lot. News of Bexby's apparent institutionalization was incredibly suspicious, while the fact he had some kind of grand astronomical setup in his garage was surely worth investigating. There were risks, of course, but their increasingly desperate situation meant that doing nothing was not an option. "You're damn right we're going," Claire answered. "And we're going to have to get there before that asshole with the microphone." Chapter 4. While Jack Bexby's neighbor insisted he could have no direct part in any questionable activity and so wouldn't join them in investigating the garage, Martin and Claire were glad he had given them the lead. He even offered a tip about a shortcut to the back of the house, from where they could enter the property. There was no guarantee Bexby's garage wouldn't be alarmed, but that was no deterrent given the huge importance of trying to find out what he was going to tell the couple before his apparent institutionalization. Claire waved away cameras and rushed to the car, hardly having to exaggerate her emotions, while Martin thanked the community for coming out, but said the whole event was too much for his wife to handle. Safely in the car, they headed for the shortcut. It proved very fast and enabled easy access to the property, as Bexby's neighbor promised. The door at the rear entrance to the garage was identical to the couple's own, which made prying it open easier than it might have been. Even without the need for them to violently smash their way in, however, they still knew there was a strong chance they had already tripped a silent alarm system linked to a remote security firm, or maybe even the local police. When they made their way in, this became all but certain in their minds. The garage was full to the brim with expensive-looking astronomy equipment, with the large telescope clearly having a computerized navigation system and all manner of other wondrous devices lining the floors and workspaces. In Martin's mind, there was no way someone wouldn't have an alarm system for a place like this. "We have to be fast," he said. Claire was already moving quickly, opening drawers and overturning papers in search of some kind of smoking gun. For several minutes, the couple worked independently. A computer screen was still powered on and active, indicating that Bexby had been using it fairly recently. Martin focused there while Claire continued her physical search. "He set up a system to monitor the mission," Martin relayed, talking as he scrolled and clicked. "There are messages to and from astronomers and other observatories around the world, agreeing to keep a line of sight when it's not visible from here. What the hell did this guy do for work to afford all of this?" "Oh, he got a huge negligence payout from the city when his wife died in a work accident," Claire replied. "The poor guy went from that to this. Talk about no luck." Martin deferred to her local social knowledge. He then navigated to the drafts folder of Bexby's emails and felt his eyes widen. "He was emailing an observatory this afternoon to say that one of his remote telescopes picked up an unexpected change in trajectory," Martin said, his tone suddenly more intense than before. Excited certainly wasn't the word, given the context, but he was glad to be making progress. Claire immediately stopped what she was doing and rushed over. "And?"
"The message didn't send," Martin reported. "He hadn't finished writing it, but he had already attached a new file for the tracking system, based on the new trajectory if there was no further change. I'll try to open it."
With a few clicks, the file opened within a software program Martin didn't recognize. Another few clicks later, the roof over the back of the garage was parting as the telescope turned towards its new target.
"According to this, it should be theoretically visible from here for the next hour or so," Martin continued. Now excitement was tinging his words. "There's a 90-minute window and we're in it."
At first, this felt like a huge stroke of luck, but he knew they had made their own luck by coming here. This was almost certainly what Bexby had planned to tell them about. And without doubt, the start time he planned for the vigil was clearly no coincidence. The telescope wasn't the classically shaped kind either of the couple were familiar with, and they couldn't even see an eyepiece. Once the target was locked, though, the computer screen changed to reflecting the incoming visual data. Within seconds, 4 words flashed up on the screen. Object detected. Match confirmed. "Oh my God," Claire whispered, her hands shooting to her face in shock. "Martin, it's still there! He's still there!" Martin focused entirely on the screen. Claire wasn't misreading anything. He was just taking longer to feel it sink in. What in the hell was going on? What kind of government cover-up was at work here? And why? "Here," Claire said, handing Martin a piece of paper. "This is the best lead I found right before you called me over." Martin glanced down. The paper contained a handwritten phone number and a single word: Darius. Martin's phone was out of his pocket in a flash. This had to be a direct line to Darius Spector, the CEO of Astro Tours, who was being roundly blamed for the supposed disaster. And while Darius didn't have a child on the mission, his entire business and his personal reputation were in tatters due to what now seemed to be explicit government lies. "Wait, are you sure?" Claire asked. "He seemed like he only cared about his company, even at the launch."
"And now the government and the media are throwing him under the bus," Martin said. "We can't go to them with this. They'd lock us up, like Bexby. And yeah, Darius might be an asshole. Hell, he is. But our interests align here. He has access to resources we couldn't dream of, too. He's the one person who could help us."
Claire nodded, and Martin made the call without another word. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Darius didn't pick up. Martin left a voicemail, taking no time for carefully considering how much to say. He laid it out very efficiently. The craft was still visible on a new trajectory, and the father who noticed it was now in some kind of custody or psychiatric detention.
"His phone will be going crazier than ours have been," Martin admitted. "But hopefully he'll see this transcription and call back while there's still—"
Abruptly, Martin's words were cut off by the welcome buzzing of his own phone. With silent mode activated, it only buzzed for designated VIP contacts, or anyone he had recently tried to call. Straight away, he saw whose number it was.
"Darius?"
He immediately answered.
"Martin Holmes?"
The billionaire replied.
"If you are who you say you are, tell me the name of the hotel where we had the first group meeting after the mission passengers were selected."
"It wasn't a hotel," Martin said.
"Woodview Ranch."
After a few seconds of silence, Darius spoke again.
"Jesus, so this is real. Okay. First of all, you guys have to know I have nothing to do with any of this. Nothing they're saying is true. We didn't cut any corners, and there's no beneficial insurance policy. This is going to ruin me. There's no coming back from this. I didn't know why the hell they were blaming me so quickly. But if the craft really is still intact, then something very weird is going on. You guys need to get out of there. But you need to take whatever you can with you. Hard drives, paperwork, anything. Take photos, too. And forward any important emails to yourself, not to me. No one can know I know about this. We have to meet in person."
Claire busily snapped photos and gathered paperwork, while Martin got to work on the emails.
"I'm at the Gravesend Suite, 6 miles from the launch site," Darius went on. "I booked under an alias. No one knows I'm here. I can meet you guys in the parking lot. There are some action steps I can take here, but they could bring a lot of trouble our way very quickly. Right now I don't have a lot of choice. I have to clear my name. And I know you guys have to do whatever you can while there's hope your kid is still up there. We have to get to the bottom of this."
"See you there," Martin confirmed. A loud knock on the garage's front door then took his attention. "This is Kyle Forrest from RBCN News," a voice said. "Mr. Holmes? Mrs. Holmes? Are you in there?" Martin took a deep breath and quickly finished up forwarding Bexby's recent emails to his own account. "Should we switch everything off?" Claire asked. Martin hesitated. It was now a matter of time until the relentless media hounds made it inside. In a normal world, he would want the reporters to know what they had just found. But their world of late was far from normal. Martin ultimately decided that if the government found out their lies were in the process of being unraveled, they would be better placed to stop the couple from getting any further. With that in mind, he yanked out the power cable from Bexby's computer, and then did the same with the telescope.
Hopefully they'd have to log in to see anything else, and they won't know his credentials,
he explained. The couple then rushed through the back door and to the secluded dirt road at the back of Bexby's property. Fortunately, there were no media personnel here, and they had the neighbor at the vigil's local knowledge to thank for this discreet getaway point. In the car, Martin drove with his headlights off until he reached the main road, and then quickly sped out of town. For now, he and Claire had done all they could. They knew a lot more than they had a few minutes earlier, and they possessed evidence to prove it. It wasn't going to be a long drive to the meeting point, and both silently understood that everything rested on what would happen in that hotel parking lot. Chapter 5. There was no room for second-guessing as Martin sped towards Darius Spector's hotel, driving as quickly as he could without being reckless or drawing attention to the car. Tension circled during the short drive, but both he and Claire were less desolate than they had been 15 minutes earlier. Sure, the adrenaline played a part, but more than that, they had just seen live proof that their son's spacecraft was still intact and close to Earth, contrary to the official reports of a catastrophic disaster. It still felt like a huge long shot to think they could get to the bottom of things and somehow bring Stephen home, but for the first time in too long, there was at least some semblance of hope. Martin pulled into the parking lot and saw no one on foot. He looked up at the small hotel in search of any twitching window blinds, but again saw nothing. "There!" Claire blurted out, pointing to their left where a man was emerging from a darkened vehicle. He wore a hood, but they knew who he was. Darius Spector, one of the world's richest men, stepped towards the car and casually climbed into the back seat. He had a small, briefcase-like computer bag in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. Having Darius inside their car was a truly surreal situation for the couple, but not half as surreal as everything else that had been going on. When he lowered his hood, the ordinarily well-presented billionaire looked haggard and desperate.
"What do you have?"
he asked. Martin handed over his phone, which now contained the emails he forwarded from the garage. Claire passed hers, too, to show Darius the photographs she took of the screen, the telescope, and just about everything else.
"Good work,"
Darius said almost right away, flicking his eyes between the two phones that represented gold mines of important evidence.
"Okay, we should get out of here. Head for the strip mall on the corner of Garrison and West. We should probably think about taking the plates off this car, too. If they're looking for you, the cameras on every traffic light will scan the plates and tell them exactly where you are. I'm sure you guys agree that we don't want that."
Martin didn't need to hear another word. He quickly stepped out of the car and removed his license plates. This in itself might look suspicious when they were driving, but it sure beat being instantly identified by the plate recognition cameras Darius mentioned. Only a minute or so later, they were on the move again. "So what can we do?" Claire asked, looking back to Darius. "Is that a computer you've brought?" Darius nodded.
"Yeah. And seriously, you guys found a lot. This is black and white. The craft is up there, and we can prove it. The trouble is we can't trust anyone. I have to clear my name. You have to save your kid. But before we can do that, we have to know what the hell is actually going on." "That's why we came to you," Martin chimed in. "You have contacts, right? Your company is behind the whole mission."
Darius looked up momentarily.
"Yes and no. We provided the craft and the logistics, but the mission control team for this launch are public agency workers. That's all politics. But everything they do runs on infrastructure they bought from me. AstroTours is a small part of our space business. We hope to change that, naturally, but for now most of our revenue has come from hardware sales and communications contracts. And since I guess we're all in the same boat here, I can let you guys in on a little secret. You see, my teams administer the agency's systems. Through that, we have access to all kinds of information the agency doesn't know about. Technically, there might be some laws against that kind of thing, but I'm not a saint. I have a business to run, and data is currency.
Martin hardly knew what to say.
You have backdoor access to internal agency communications? Darius, that's a hell of a lot more than technically illegal. They could have you for espionage.
Darius shrugged.
Well, right now they want me up against the wall for criminal negligence. This is what I was talking about as the risky move I can make. I can get in remotely and look at their recent communications from Mission Control. The risk is, there's a chance they'll spot the intrusion. But it's like you guys at the garage. I have to look. This is the only chance I have of clearing my name.
By now, it was par for the course that Darius cared more about his business and his name than the safety of the children inside his spacecraft. Neither Martin nor Claire voiced their displeasure at that, or indeed any disagreement with the risky but admittedly promising course of action Darius was suggesting. They were potentially implicating themselves in some very serious business now, but there was already no going back. With Stephen's life quite possibly on the line, the only way was forward, whatever road it took them down. Darius pulled his computer from its bag and booted up an application the couple couldn't see from the front seat. He typed and clicked without speaking for several minutes. The car reached the deserted strip mall before he had anything to report, at which point Martin turned around to ask how it was going.
I'm in, Darius said. I'm looking at some communication chains now. The one with the highest clearance levels and the most replies starts just a few weeks before they reached out to me for the mission, 18 months ago. They're talking about... Holy shit.
What? Martin and Claire shrieked in unison. Darius sat stunned, his mouth open in shock. He hadn't stopped talking intentionally, or to build suspense. He was simply unable to believe what he was reading, let alone to relay it.
Darius,
Martin boomed, slapping him on the leg. This shook him out of it.
Okay, what I'm seeing tells us that they didn't suddenly decide to start pursuing space exploration again at random. They did it because they found something. Or more to the point, something found them.
No way, Claire whispered, mainly to herself.
Yes, Way. It's right here in black and white,
Darius replied, gulping as though he was still struggling to believe it.
Guys, our government has been secretly communicating with aliens.
Chapter 6.
Aliens?
Martin echoed in disbelief.
Are you sure you're not misreading something?
Darius turned his computer around to eliminate all doubt. The couple needed only a quick glance to see that he wasn't leaping to any conclusions. Everything was there in black and white. Martin's phone buzzed in his pocket. Since this told him there was an incoming call or message from a designated VIP contact, of which he had very few, he quickly glanced at it. It was a message from his brother, noting that Martin and Claire's illegal entry into Jack Bexby's garage was now national news, thanks to the media personnel who were on the scene. I know how upset you must be, but you have to let the authorities do their jobs, the message concluded. The irony of that statement was almost too much for Martin's brain to compute. His brother's intentions were good, of course, but he had no idea just what kind of information those authorities were covering up. And if they could so fully conceal something as explosive as contact with aliens, there was no telling what else they could be lying about. Martin's phone displayed dozens of other notifications, with the most recent being a breaking news article about the garage situation. The article, titled "Who Spiked the Punch with Crazy Juice?", ran alongside photos of Bexby, Martin, and Claire. The inane media reaction to these events stood in stark contrast to the world-changing revelation Darius Spector had just uncovered. The triviality of the news cycle was a truly jarring backdrop to the trio's incredible new knowledge, as was the mundanity of their physical location in a strip mall parking lot.
"This chain looks like it goes on forever," Darius reported. "Further down, they're talking about some kind of deal without saying what it is."
Is there a higher security text chain somewhere else? Claire asked. Darius shook his head, but stopped scrolling and started clicking as though trying something else.
"I didn't see one, and I'm in here as a system admin, so unless something has been manually hidden, it should be... Aha! It was. Okay, this one starts a week after the first. So this is right around when the agency reached out to me looking for a partnership. Wow, these names? This is a real top-level discussion. Wallace Haynes, he's high up in the agency." "Haynes? That's our liaison officer," Martin recalled. "That scumbag is on there? He called us about the loss of communication with the craft and told us not to worry, then called back to break the news of a disaster. And you're telling me he's part of this?" "A huge part of it," Darius stated. "His message is the one relaying the radio frequency and language modality they've been using to talk to the aliens. This chain tells us everything."
At this point, Darius turned sideways so the entire trio could see his screen. Martin had to lean most, but he still had a good view. When Darius scrolled down, and the nature of the aforementioned deal became painfully apparent, though, his eyes closed in abject desolation. No one could speak. The messages revealed that intelligent aliens had contacted Earth's leaders and offered a trade like no other. In exchange for incredible new technologies that would enrich an elite few and strengthen existing power structures, the aliens asked for 12 excellent young human specimens to be delivered into orbit, thus avoiding the need for any public revelation of their own existence. It was stomach-churning in every regard, and instantly punctured what little hope there had been for Stephen's safe return.
"The agency is serving the kids up on a plate,"
Martin croaked, his mouth dry and his words heavy.
"Darius, tell me there's something we can do. Tell me you have a next move."
But Darius, as stunned and as sickened as they were, had no reply. Chapter 7.
"Those bastards sold me down the river," Darius lamented. "The craft was never supposed to make it home. They sold me out for some promise of alien technologies to enrich themselves. They knew this would kill my company, and they did it anyway. The goddamn nerve!"
"The nerve?" Claire yelled. "Our son is on that craft, and you're going to sit there complaining about your company? You're going to say that, and you're going to talk about nerve?" That Darius was more focused on his business interests than anything else was no major revelation by now, but the explicitness of his last comment was too much for Claire to let slide.
"I just can't fathom that they could do this,"
Martin growled bitterly. He didn't like Darius and his selfish considerations right now either, but they were on the same side of a broader betrayal.
"Children? How could they sacrifice children?" "Governments kill children all the time," Darius sighed. "That's the least crazy part of this. Whether it's cutting support programs or denying costly treatments at home, or blocking infrastructure projects and dropping bombs overseas, they don't care."
Neither parent had a rebuttal to that. It seemed like there was an us versus them conflict at hand, but between humanity and its self-serving leaders, rather than humanity and an alien race. As Martin and Claire struggled to come to terms with their government's impossibly heartless plan, Darius was still scrolling.
"Wait, here's something," he said, shifting in his seat. "Right at the bottom, from today. There's a message saying the aliens have stopped responding. They haven't confirmed sight of the craft, and they haven't completed the trade when they were supposed to."
Martin scratched his chin, trying to make sense of this.
"So they've maybe backed out? There might still be time for us to do something about this? Take it to the media, maybe, now that we have proof." "They'll say we're crazy," Darius replied, shaking his head as he kept reading. "Even if we try to... Oh, shit."
All over again, The parents felt their hearts sink. Just as an iota of hope was resurfacing, the sudden drop in Darius's tone and his abrupt silence pointed to one final and decisive blow.
"The last message here is from 3 hours ago," Darius reported. "It says if the aliens don't complete the trade within 12 hours, which is 9 hours from now, the agency is going to cut their losses and tie up the loose ends. Guys, they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure this story never gets out. They're going to destroy the craft."
Chapter 8. An all-new level of helplessness swirled within the trio's minds. Even if the aliens had a change of heart, or an operational issue prevented them from completing the trade, humanity's corrupt leaders were set to step in and tie up the loose ends, which was to say, end lives of the teenage passengers and their pilots aboard the supposedly lost spacecraft. It was gut-wrenching, devastating, and positively chilling. It was also beyond perverse. The powers that be would willingly sacrifice innocent children for nothing to make sure they didn't get caught trying and failing to sacrifice those same children for personal and political gain. There had to be a special place in hell for the leaders making these calls, but that was of no consolation to Martin and Claire. They were up against sheer and heartless wickedness that clearly knew no bounds. They didn't quite feel like they were fighting against it, because the word fight would imply a showdown that could possibly be won. Right now, the couple couldn't even see a next move, let alone a path to the only desirable outcome of getting Stephen home safely from space. After a long and especially heavy silence, Martin was the first to break down. Feeling truly and decisively defeated for the first time since Jack Bexby's call earlier in the day had offered a sliver of hope, he had nothing left to do but cry. Claire was close behind, in no position to console her husband and barely able to even control her own breathing. In the back seat, Darius Spector watched on silently. Facing the true extent of their grief for the first time, and with his own conscience weighing heavier than ever before, new feelings were suddenly brewing within him.
"There's one thing we can try," he said. "It's a long shot that we can do it, and a much longer shot that it will do any good, but it's something."
Slowly, the couple gathered themselves enough to turn and face him.
"The access I have from this computer is read-only," he explained. "I can see what they've said, but I can't communicate with them, or anyone else, including the only guys who could possibly help us out here. We could go to the media in an hour and try to get this out to a huge audience, but we're all on the same page about how that will go. They'll say we're crazy, and they only have to fob us off for a few hours until it's too late. Leaking all of this could save my company by showing I had nothing to do with it, but it could risk forcing the agency's hand and making them act quicker. It would save my ass in the long run, but not your son's."
"And since when do you care about him?" Claire retorted. "Your company and your reputation are the only things you've cared about from the start." Darius sighed slowly, unable to argue with that.
"No one has ever said I have a heart of gold, Claire, but I do have a heart."
Evidently, this was what it took to kick that heart into gear.
"I can't sit by while they kill these kids. Abstract lies and betrayals are one thing, but this is real. This is just... it's sick. I'll die before I let them get away with it."
Martin held the man's eyes, seeing true emotion for the first time.
"So what's the one thing we can try?"
he asked.
"We know the frequency and language modality they've used to communicate with the aliens,"
Darius said, speaking slowly and rather quietly, as if he was aware of how far-fetched his idea might sound.
"If we can get into my facility, which they've officially locked down as part of this bullshit witch hunt against me, we could send a message to the aliens. It's by the launch site, not too far from here. We have all the information we need, and I have all the equipment."
"To say what?" Claire asked right away. Darius hesitated.
We'll think of that on the way. But if I'm one thing, I'm a deal maker. Those aliens might have had a change of heart. We can offer them something. We can appeal to their better nature. We can even warn them about how untrustworthy the people they've been talking to are. The point is, I don't think anyone on Earth can help us save your son. He's in space, and so are the aliens. That's why we have to try and reach out to them.
If their day and night hadn't tumbled so quickly from one crazy idea and bombshell revelation to the next, the couple might have had a hard time going along with this. But as it went, and as had been the case on those previous occasions, they had no option but to play the only hand available. Okay, Claire gulped.
So how do we get in?
Martin asked, turning on the car's ignition. Darius nodded, pleased they were on board.
There's a secret entrance. An exit, really, but I can get in. Just like you guys at the garage. The stakes are higher and the risks are very real, but it's the only chance we have. I could go alone, but I imagine you guys want to see exactly what I do. Not that you don't trust me, but...
Oh, we don't, Claire cut in. But we're fighting the same enemy here. We're coming with you.
I need the address of your facility,
Martin said, as he pulled out of the strip mall's parking lot. Darius shook his head.
Leave the navigation to me, Martin. We're taking the scenic route.
Chapter 9. During the drive to Darius Spector's officially closed space research facility, the trio narrowed down on the message they wanted to send to the aliens. If they'd had a moment to think about the gravity of what this all meant, bona fide alien contact, it would have been difficult to get their heads around the broader context. As it went, however, they were so consumed by the urgency of their new mission that their focus on specifics left no room to ponder the bigger picture. While they were talking about their outgoing message, Darius continued to scan through the goldmine of agency communications he had hacked into. He found illuminating information explicitly stating that the aliens had communicated directly via indecipherable voice signals and easily readable English text. This alone seemed almost too incredible to believe, but it quickly made a degree of sense as he read on and noted that the aliens' initial message explained that they had been monitoring Earth for centuries and had built a full understanding of the culturally and politically dominant language by studying broadcast signals. A vocal translator was in development based on linking their speech to the accompanying text, one agency insider confirmed, but that was of no immediate consequence to the trio's urgent goals. While all of this was becoming known, Martin did an admirable job of focusing on the road and dutifully followed Darius's driving instructions as they came. Before too long, a sharp turn down a concealed service road led to an abrupt dead end.
Now what?
Martin asked. Darius replied by getting out of the car and placing his hand against what looked like a solid wall. Amazingly, the rock parted to reveal some kind of cave or tunnel.
Are you a damn supervillain or something?
Martin asked as Darius got back into the car.
It's an emergency escape route,
Darius shrugged.
I never envisaged using it to get in, but it doesn't hurt to give yourself a backdoor channel, just like in the comms system.
Martin studied him carefully.
So I keep driving? Oh no, we're here,
Darius said.
I'm just getting my computer. You might want to park under the cover of those trees, though, just in case any drones or helicopters spot it down here.
Martin followed this wise advice. Less than a minute later, he was walking alongside Claire into what felt an awful lot like a madman's lair. Light automatically illuminated overhead as they proceeded through the paved tunnel, only ever showing 20 yards ahead. Before too much longer, they reached a locked door with a keypad and iris scanner.
I don't think there's anyone inside,
Darius assured the couple, turning to face them.
The facility isn't open on Sundays, and the so-called lockdown is just government noise. There are some visible guards out front, but they're sitting in their cars. No one is hooked into the systems, and no one should know we're inside until we start sending the message.
And then what? Claire asked. Darius hesitated.
Look, If you guys are worried about what will happen to us after we do this, you might not want to do it. This isn't a game. I don't see a happy ending where we waltz out and lie low until your son comes home. This is to give him a chance. But we might be sacrificing ourselves to stop the agency from sacrificing him and the other passengers. We're all in on that, Martin said. But you? I can't do nothing, Darius said. They're kids.
Martin looked at him with a newfound respect. Somewhere along the line, the billionaire's outlook really had changed. With the final decision to act now made, Darius effortlessly unlocked the door. It was his door, after all, and his facility built to his specifications.
It's not far,
Darius assured the couple as he led the way. Even sooner than they expected, he led them through another locked door and towards a large row of screens. Each had a chair behind it, just like in the movies, and they all faced one huge screen at the very front. Darius sat down and booted up one of the computers. Using his own laptop as a reference point, he navigated to the remote control system for a radio telescope and directed it to send a very particular message in a very particular direction on a very particular frequency. The message covered several bases. It insisted the aliens would be making a mistake to trade with these specifically untrustworthy humans they had communicated with so far, while also appealing to their better nature by stating how gravely the children on the craft were missed by their betrayed families. Darius also included the painful reality that Earth's leaders were going to sacrifice the children to protect themselves if the aliens made no further contact. Attempting appeals to both emotion and expediency, he told the aliens they could gain far more by dealing with humanity as a whole, rather than a self-serving subset, if only they would make themselves known as soon as possible. Both the lives of the children and a cooperative future depended on it. He closed by stressing that these leaders could not be trusted, and that any small group capable of selfishly selling out their own people could also find ways to trick or betray the aliens, whether or not the planned trade was eventually completed. The only way to save the situation was for a timely alien intervention, protecting the children and holding to account the heartless leaders who had sold them down the river. There was no handbook for communicating with aliens at the best of times, let alone in such a desperate situation. But the trio felt like they had covered as many bases as they could with only a short while to think about it. Darius ensured the format of the message and the signal he was wrapping it in matched exactly with previous examples, then pressed the all-important button to broadcast it. "Sending," he said, forcing out a sharp exhalation of relief. That relief, however, lasted all of 5 seconds, because 5 seconds was all it took for the alarm to start blaring overhead. No one had to state the obvious. They were busted. Sending the signal had, quite literally, raised the alarm. Chapter 10. Even as the alarm blared, each of the trio kept their eyes locked on the screen, fixating on the progress bar under the word "sending." This was what mattered. This, and this alone, was now all that mattered. "Done!" Darius yelled in excitement. "Sent! Whatever they do to us, they can't put this message back in the bottle. I don't know what the aliens will do with this either, but they'll hear it. The last thing I can do for you guys is get us all the hell out of here." With that, they set off. As they moved, a horrible new sound filled the air. It was even harsher than the alarm. So dissonant and close, the sound came from each of their pockets, and when they lifted out their phones to see what was going on, they knew the game really was up. Each looked down at a notification of an emergency alert notice, which would be broadcast simultaneously to everyone in a wide local area. It was, quite simply, about them. The trio were now wanted for criminal espionage and potentially leaking national security secrets. It stated that law enforcement would stop at nothing to detain them in the vicinity of the facility, but that they should be considered dangerous until that time came. "This could be harder than I thought," Darius gulped, shouting over the alarms.
But we can't stand still. We have to run. Just drop your phones first. They'll be tracking us. We've done all we can with the evidence anyway. Our best bet for making it out of here to see what happens next is to go without them."
Martin and Claire both threw their phones to the ground, agreeing with the logic and glad Darius had thought of it. They then rushed back to the door and into the tunnel. The wall at the other end had closed behind them, allowing no sight of the outside world. After a rapid sprint, Darius reached the exit first and unlocked it with his hand. Moments later, the door parted and a light came into view, a light that shouldn't have been there. It was an unnatural beam, intense and focused, seemingly coming from a handheld flashlight. "Hey, stop where you are!" a voice called in. Their chests heaved heavily.
"I'm sorry,"
Darius said, turning backwards to the couple.
"I tried."
Chapter 11.
This is Kyle Forrest reporting live for RBCN News, and I have the criminal trio right here at the edge of Spectre's facility,
the man holding the flashlight excitedly boomed. As Martin reached the threshold and raised a hand to shield against the beam, he realized it was coming from a light mounted to the man's camera. The biggest shock, though, was that there was a camera at all. Upon first seeing the light, Martin wasn't alone in thinking law enforcement officers had closed in at great speed. The fact that a member of the media had beaten them to it, just like at Jack Bexby's garage, spoke to how well-organized and relentless these newshounds really were. Martin recognized the man's name and voice, too, from outside Jack Bexby's garage.
"Do you have any comment for the people watching around the world?"
Forrest continued. In lieu of a comment, Darius Spectre outmuscled the reporter and knocked his expensive camera to the ground. But within seconds, the sound of screeching tires filled the night air as yet more reporters flooded in. The flashing lights and siren of a police car became noticeable soon afterwards, but it was behind at least 4 media vehicles, which were now blocking the trio's only way out. As another cameraman bundled out of a car and rushed over, with several more close behind, Darius didn't use any more force. There were now simply too many of them, and the incoming police officers would change the equation too.
"Grief makes people do crazy things," the new reporter stated, trying to sound grand in what was sure to be the biggest moment of his career. "Mr. and Mrs. Holmes, is that what's driving this? A reluctance to accept the reality of what has happened, and somehow falling under the spell of the man who everyone else is holding responsible?" "Darius isn't responsible for anything," Martin insisted, defending him in a way that would have seemed unthinkable only an hour earlier.
At this point, Darius stepped in and whispered to Martin that they had to be careful not to say the wrong thing, as they would only have one chance.
"Look,"
Darius said, addressing Forrest and the other arriving reporters.
"None of you, or me, can imagine what these parents are going through. Things aren't as they seem. The situation is a lot more complicated than it looks from the outside, and certain forces have painted a certain picture of what's gone on that bears no resemblance to reality. You should all be ashamed of yourselves, too, not only for buying the government lies, hook, line, and sinker, but for hounding these innocent people and creating a circus out of this. Hiding in bushes, chasing their car, hounding them like criminals. This is not—"
Whoa, I'll have to stop you right there, Mr. Spectre, a young reporter cut in.
"Oh, I'll tell you when I'm ready to stop,"
Darius grunted. But instead of talking, the man gestured with his hand for the entire trio to look on the screen of his tripod-mounted camera, which showed a live feed of the station he was broadcasting on. Or, more accurately, a live feed of the station he had been broadcasting on until a few seconds earlier. Because where his live footage had previously been relayed, a high-contrast screen full of text now took its place. "It's on every station," another reporter called.
"Holy shit, is this real?"
one more chimed in. As Martin and Claire gazed in slack-jawed wonder at the screen, they knew it was. The message began with 2 words none of the reporters had ever truly expected to read, and 2 words which would have stunned the couple just as much if it weren't for the remarkable series of revelations that had successively rocked their world throughout the evening. Those words set the tone for everything that followed. Greetings, Earthlings. A smile, tentative but wide, spread across Martin's face. The message continued on across 7 lines, spinning a tale that showed a remarkable understanding of human psychology and politics. The aliens, evidently, had forced their message onto the emergency broadcast system, bypassing governmental approval. Like their mastery of English, this ability was incredible, but made sense to Martin when he considered that they were obviously far more technologically developed and had just as obviously been keeping a close eye on Earth for a very long time. The message, in essence, was a cover story for what was going on. It read as though the goal was to give Earth's leadership a way to bring the children home without losing face or admitting any wrongdoing, let alone admitting the full extent of their evil bargain. The aliens claimed to have detected an unusual craft in Earth's orbit and to have held it in place for analysis. Now, having perceived no threat to themselves, they promised to release the craft for a safe return. The message concluded by stating that they were impressed by how some elements of humanity had come together to help those in need, despite others doing the opposite. Midway through their reading of the message, the trio heard an unsettling and almost reptilian voice playing through one of the reporter's speakers. If there had been any thought in anyone's mind that this was some kind of hoax, the sheer alienness of the voice, there truly was no other word, put a stop to such doubts. Claire and Martin looked away from the screen and into each other's eyes. They couldn't get too excited or count any chickens just yet, because they knew the real threat to Stephen and his fellow passengers came not from the aliens, but from the devious human leaders who had been willing to sacrifice them for personal and political gain. The aliens had taken a deft touch with their message, allowing a way for those leaders to resolve things without being implicated. It didn't sit right with the trio that those leaders were so far dodging blame, but that paled in comparison to getting the children home safely. "That would appear to be the end of the incredible alien message," Kyle Forrest announced. "Mr. and Mrs. Holmes, what is your initial reaction to this news? Do you have a message for the people who called you crazy? Is there anything you would like to say for our RBCN audience or on behalf of our fine sponsors at Ultra Shine Teeth Whitening Strips?" Martin looked at the man blankly, wondering how anyone could trivialize the breaking news of alien contact with such a shameless corporate plug. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Holmes," Forrest continued, "but I'm hearing our anchors have managed to get the first response from a government official. Our team is the best in the business, just like Ultra Shine Teeth Whitening Strips are the best in theirs. And we can cut over now to hear live from Wallace Haynes." Forrest unmuted his own screen as the trio crowded around to watch Haynes speak on the news network, reacting to this remarkable development. The man looked like a deer in headlights. "This alien communication is a colossal shock to all of us," Haynes lied, "and it raises far more questions than answers. We can confirm that the craft has resumed its data broadcasts and that all systems appear fully functional. We are attempting to restore communications as we speak. Let me assure the nation and the world as a whole that our sole priority is ensuring the immediate safety of these innocent children, who have apparently been trapped and shielded in a manner that convinced us the craft had disintegrated in the ocean of space. Once they are home, which is an outcome we now expect to achieve within 24 hours, our agency will assist in facilitating conversations between world governments so that humanity can react to this as a single global community." Martin had nothing but disdain for the lying snake that was Wallace Haynes, but there was no denying he had delivered a very quick reply that plausibly denied any prior knowledge. Haynes was a good liar, for sure. "I'd also like to state that the actions of Darius Spector and Stephen Holmes' parents may have been misconstrued in the heat of the moment," Haynes continued.
They were prematurely identified as criminals by whoever made that call, and I want to assure law enforcement that the trio should not be detained. To our knowledge at the agency, and we are better placed than anyone to know these things, no crime has been committed.
This, perhaps, was the most surprising statement of all.
But,
Haynes said, his tone shifting.
I also want to tell the trio that it's now time for them to step back and let the agency bring the craft home safely. I would implore them, in the strongest possible terms, not to do or say anything that might jeopardize or interfere with our mission to recover the children. Steps will be taken to establish exactly what has gone on here in due course. But it's in everyone's interest that we all focus on what matters most right now. The teenagers' lives depend on it.
Haynes ended there. The trio hardly had to read between the lines to know that his final comments were a thinly veiled threat. No matter what the aliens said in public, and what they might have communicated directly to Haynes and his colleagues, Martin and Claire knew they had to go along with the plea for silence. Until Stephen was safely on the ground, the ball was in the agency's court. They would surely do something to ensure compliant silence even after that. No doubt with some Machiavellian threat they would dream up overnight. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, a relief like none the couple had ever experienced was flooding through them.
Let these poor people go home, Darius demanded of the media. I'll answer your questions, but they've been through enough.
Darius gave the couple a wink to ensure them he understood the need to play the agency's game of silence, and by now they trusted him implicitly. He had really stepped up when it counted most, putting something before his own interests in a way they wouldn't have expected a few hours earlier.
Oh, there's a tracker under your car,
Kyle Forrest whispered to Martin with a bowed head, looking every inch like a guilty dog.
I stuck it there during the vigil. It was nothing personal, just business.
Martin resisted the urge to punch Kyle's teeth down his throat, which most certainly would have been personal, but also couldn't bring himself to thank the scoundrel for admitting what he had done. The tracker explained how Kyle had gotten to the secret entrance so long before the police or any other media personnel, and really did serve to highlight what a blight on society some elements of the corporate media had become. That, though, like so much else, felt like a trifling point compared to the only thing that truly mattered. Stephen was coming home. Nothing was certain until his feet were on the ground, but both Martin and Claire stepped into their car feeling considerably lighter than they had when they stepped out. All kinds of questions remained about why the aliens had ceased communicating before the trade, and why they had acted so carefully to maximize the chance of a safe return for the children. Martin and Claire both hoped some answers would come soon, but as they drove home to their empty nest, the only thing they really cared about was getting their son back home. The one thing they knew for sure was they had done everything they possibly could. Chapter 12. The next morning was an eventful one, to say the least. Darius Spector, in his eternal wisdom and slipperiness, held a metaphorical gun to Wallace Haynes and his colleagues' heads by warning him that he had uploaded every ounce of evidence to an online account, which would automatically share it in 24 hours unless the children were indeed returned to safety. This would rule out any supposedly botched attempts at landing, in case the powers that be were still reluctant to allow the craft and its passengers to land. He also demanded the immediate release of Jack Bexby, whose initial raising of the alarm had enabled Darius and the Holmeses to finish what he started. Given how incriminating Spector's data trove was, Haynes and the agency had no choice but to ensure his will was done. Bexby, like Martin and Claire, fully understood the need to stay quiet. He had even more reason to be bitter than they did, with his unjust incarceration adding to the shared rage they all felt for how their children had been treated. The previous day had highlighted that there truly were no actions a parent wouldn't take to save their children. All three risked everything to find the truth in a bid to ensure the craft's safe return, but the pursuit of truth was very much in service of that far more visceral goal. Now, And somewhat ironically, if keeping the truth quiet was what they had to do to get their children home, then keeping the truth quiet was what they would do. When evening fell, Bexby embraced Martin and Claire at the launch site where they and a huge number of well-wishers were gathered to welcome the craft back to Earth. Darius was there too.
"Listen,"
the billionaire said.
"Once this is all done, I want all of you to be able to fade into however much obscurity you want. Normal lives, or the most normal you can have. But I don't want these scumbags to get away with what they tried to do. This whole thing has showed me that some things are more important than business, and that I have a lot less to lose than you do. So when the dust settles on all of this, I'm going to leak what I found in the communications logs. I won't release anything about your garage, Jack. And guys, I won't say anything about you either. I can even make it look like a leak from my systems, like some truth-seeking hacker has done it. The government is never going to do business with me again anyway, so I might as well help justice do its thing."
There was certainly truth in Darius's appraisal that his company's days of enjoying lucrative government contracts were a thing of the past. And even if the craft's safe return would save AstroTour's reputation, the existence of powerful aliens capable of interfering with human missions hardly seemed conducive to the health of the space tourism industry. More pertinently, though, he really did seem to have changed and grown. As the time of the spacecraft's approach drew near, everyone in attendance held their breath. Even when it came into view and smiles spread across every face, Martin and Claire felt their hearts thumping. Stephen's craft was within sight, but only when he was within touching distance would they truly believe the nightmare was all over. Within minutes, a spectacular touchdown brought gasps and applause from all around. Fireworks filled the sky from the other side of the launch site, where members of the public had gathered beyond the safety barriers. And then, soon after the craft touched down on solid ground, Stephen Holmes climbed out and did the same. Claire could contain herself no longer and burst through a small joint in the safety fencing, wrapping her arms around Stephen before he even had his helmet off. Martin couldn't have squeezed through the gap if he tried, and nor could Stephen, so they reunited at the official meeting spot. Jack Bexby's relieved embrace soon utterly enveloped his own daughter, Lucy, who had absolutely no idea what her father had been through. Having had no direct contact since the craft first lost communications, the parents didn't yet know what exactly their children had experienced either. Just as Martin asked what had happened inside the craft when it changed trajectory, particularly intrigued about how much the pilots knew and how they had been duped, a member of the public yelled a startling comment into the air. "Hey, everyone! It's the aliens again! Every news and radio station!" Martin and Claire reached for their phones, which Darius had thoughtfully recovered from his facility and brought along for the landing. Stephen squeezed between them to see what was going on.
"Aliens?"
he uttered in disbelief. "Oh, do we have a lot to tell you," Claire replied. They all focused on the message that was now being broadcast. Remarkably, it was even more incredible than the first. Taking the decision about whether or not to leak the truth out of Darius Spector's hands, the alien message explicitly stated that Earth's leaders had agreed to trade 12 excellent young human specimens for a series of alien technologies. What the aliens also now revealed, however, took irony to a new level. It began with a disclaimer that while the previous day's message had been carefully managed to ensure the children's safe return, this one was the full truth. The trade request had been a test, they explained, to judge the suitability of humanity as a candidate civilization to join COSTA, the Cosmic Technology Alliance. And by accepting the deal to sacrifice children of their own species, Earth's leaders had failed. They were, in fact, the first supposedly civilized leaders to ever agree and thus fail in this manner. The message revealed that other cultures had failed for other reasons, such as trying to fight or trick the aliens, and that the only way to pass would have been for Earth's leaders to publicly disclose the alien communication to the entire planet, rather than keep the decision-making in the hands of a select few. Darius looked at Martin and Claire, who both gave him nods of approval.
"I have proof of all of this," he boomed to the crowd. "It's true. However Haynes and the others try to dress it up, this is exactly what happened. They wanted to sacrifice these kids so they could enrich themselves and reinforce their positions of power. I found out yesterday. These maniacs should be in prison."
The crowd moved from joyous to furious with incredible speed, and it was a lucky thing for the agency and government that none of its representatives had been foolish enough to attend this event.
"It hardly seems fair that we'll all miss out on working with the aliens because of those scoundrels,"
someone called, complaining to no one in particular.
"We voted for most of those scoundrels,"
Darius replied, now the full focus of the attendant news cameras.
"We participate in their hollow elections and tacitly support them every time we choose to stay quiet instead of calling out the bullshit. And believe me, I'm as guilty as anyone. But my eyes are more open than ever, and I'm glad yours are too, because let me tell you, these aliens stepped up when it counted. Sure, the kids were only in danger because of their test, but I've got proof that they stepped in when they found out the kids couldn't get home safely without their intervention. I'll share it all. So who knows? They might give humanity another chance when they see that the assholes who'd made this sick deal don't speak for the rest of us."
At Martin's side, Stephen whispered,
"I really feel like I'm missing a lot here."
Martin chuckled, beyond glad that he was able to laugh again. A lot was wrong with the structure of the world, as Darius was passionately, if belatedly, espousing. But in Martin's own small world, with his son standing beside him, all was finally right.
"Hey, kid, before you leave,"
Darius called to Stephen, noticing that the Holmes family were indeed making a swift exit.
"Yeah?"
Stephen said. Darius held out his arm to shake the boy's hand.
"You've got a hell of a bright future ahead of you, son. And once the guilty parties are dealt with and all of this nonsense is cleaned up, our friends up there might come calling again. Our future in space just might be a lot more exciting than we thought when you blasted off."
Stephen smiled.
"You think so?" "Damn straight."
Darius smiled.
"In the meantime, stay in school, keep your head down, and keep your folks out of trouble, okay?"
As the family walked away and Darius took his place in the light of the camera glow once more, a changed man but still a lover of attention, Stephen asked his parents the burning question.
"Okay, so what's been going on down here? I mean, aliens? And what's he talking about keeping you guys out of trouble? When was the last time either of you were in trouble?"
Martin and Claire shared a warm and happy look. "We'll tell you in the car," Claire said with a smile. "Just be ready for some pretty crazy stuff." The end. Thank you for listening to Empty Nesters. Written by Craig A. Falconer. Narrated by Megan Carter. Text and production copyright 2023 by Craig Falconer.